So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, today. I really appreciate your attendance at today's Black History Month panel, which we are focusing on the topic of overcoming barriers in academic and work environments. My name is Tamina Jaffrey, and I am Yorkville University's diversity consultant. I am going to introduce our esteemed panels just in a moment. I wanted to take a little moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. So Yorkville University does operate here in Ontario on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that the applicable treaty for this region is referred to as the Toronto Purchase. So thank you all to all of our panelists for being here today, and for all of our participants. We're now midway into February, and it's amazing enjoying all of the various Black History Month discussions and online events. So I want to wish everybody a happy Black History Month. And we at Yorkville University are proud to be celebrating the achievements of our Black colleagues and colleagues of African and Afro-Caribbean descent. So today we have, as I mentioned, an excellent topic that we're going to be discussing with our special guests, which is overcoming barriers in both academic and work environments. So I'd like to take the pleasure to introduce our three panelists, Dr. Tommy Odom Lawson, Gary Priam, and Daisy Wright. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I just want to provide a little bit of highlights on their own individual career backgrounds. So Tommy is a leadership consultant, national board certified counselor, and author of the newly released book, Grace Space, Understanding and Implementing Work-Life Harmony. She provides a solutions-based approach that uniquely addresses the overlap of career success, interpersonal relationships, and home life, while helping clients figure out our strategies for enjoying work and dealing with difficult colleagues, making better career choices. Tommy sometimes uncovers emotional issues that would sabotage success in a new position or company. So I know we definitely all could benefit from Tommy's tips, and they can certainly help us out. And she's currently a member of Yorkville's Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology program as faculty. Gary Priam is the founder and president of Mossa International Inc., a management consulting company. He's also a keynote speaker and a ProSci certified change management practitioner, an organizational leadership and team development specialist, project manager, and an Italian author. I actually found out that his company's name Mossa means to move in Italian, so I thought that was really cool. Gary's keynote speeches, workshops, and seminars have helped companies and people around the world, and he currently serves as chair for Yorkville University's Bachelor of Business Administration Project Management Advisory Panel. And now we also have Daisy Wright, who is the CEO or Chief Encouragement Officer of the Right Career Solution. Again, I have to mention that is an amazing career job title, and I'm sure that many of us would, love to aspire to that as well. And so Daisy is a certified career development practitioner and a certified career management and executive leadership development coach. For more than 15 years, she's collaborated with executives, managers, and mid-career professionals to help them get hired faster. She's the author of 3 books. 21 Resilient Women is one of them. Tell Stories, Get Hired is the second one, and No Canadian Experience A is the third one. And she's contributed to more than 10 others on resume writing, career and interview coaching, and the job search. So thank you all so much again for your time. I know that I, myself, and all of the participants are looking forward to learning a lot from you during this hour. I just want to say a couple of housekeeping items just before we start. So if you do have questions from the audience, I would just ask that you please direct those to the Q&A session or the Q&A box below. And if you do have any insights that you'd like to share as we're going along, please feel free to write that down in the chat, and we can also connect with you at that point. So because it is Black History Month, obviously today's discussion is being examined through the perspectives of Black academics, executives, managers, and employees. And I think one of the first things that I wanted to start us off with is how to show up authentically in these different academic and work environments, and sort of looking at this negotiation process that's associated with that. I just want to sort of throw in a little fact there that there was a sociologist back in 1963, Irving Goffman, who coined a certain term called covering, and it refers to when individuals who have stigmatized identities make a great effort in both the academic and workplace spheres in order to cover that stigma, whether that's related to their race or their disability, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and they're really trying to blend into that mainstream. There is a human cost to that type of covering, to the individual and also to the organization. And I wanted to sort of get your thoughts on that, on maybe what you think some of those costs are and what your personal advice would be in relation to that. I don't know if anyone in particular wants to start off. Tommy, do you have any thoughts maybe on that?
Yeah, I do. I love that term covering. I am more familiar with the term code switching. And so that's
Okay.
adjusting our behaviors, our language, the way we express ourselves in order to assimilate and fit in. That modification of that behavior over time becomes natural, right? You don't even realize that you're code switching in order to assimilate. And I agree, there are definitely pros and cons to being in an environment where you are either forced to code switch or there's this unspoken expectation to code switching. Personally, it's exhausting, right? So
Mhm.
you're living two lives. You're participating in activities that you may not necessarily have an interest in, but so that you can have a common language or point of reference, so that on Mondays you can say, oh yeah, what did you do over the weekend? You can have a point of reference in order to make that connection. So it could be exhausting and disingenuine.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know if Gary or Daisy, you've ever experienced that or have any thoughts on that.
Yes. Yeah, I do actually. We're taught from birth to, basically blend into our environment, to toe the line and things like that. But we're also taught as well that we're individuals and we're unique. And so we have this, tug of war between these two different sides, like the angel and the devil type of thing. And you're right, like Tommy was saying, it can be exhausting. So you have your weekend face that you put on, and then on Mondays when you go to work, you have to, toe the line with the I guess with the organization that you're with. So it can be really taxing on an individual.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm just thinking about myself as well. I find it very difficult, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of times the topic is something that I either have no relation to, or like, and I almost can't even speak on it. I don't know, Daisy, if you had any similar experiences with respect to code switching or covering.
Yeah, well, I am familiar with, I haven't had any bad experience because I believe in showing up as me, but I'm mindful of what the whole code switching covering is all about. And
Mhm.
I think the onus is on, if we accept people for who they are. I mean, this is idealistic, but if we accept people for who they are, then we don't end up into situations like this, where we have to pretend to be somebody else on a weekend and then somebody else on. So on from Monday to Friday. So I am always looking forward, not ignoring the realities, of course, but I'm looking forward to say, accept me for who I am because I'm accepting you for who you are.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent message. And I think that really segues really well into one of the topics that we were discussing earlier when we were, convening and organizing this panel, is that I think it was you that made that point that, when we do show up as ourselves, it's one thing to be yourself and say, here I am, I'm myself. But it could go two ways. You could either be rejected and excluded, or you could be included and welcomed. And I think one of the points that you had made earlier, and that you're just saying now, right now, is that acceptance and feeling welcome is extremely important. And one of my questions for all of you is, have you ever had examples in your career where leaders or managers have made a conscious effort to make you feel welcome in a team, whether that was maybe towards yourself, or maybe you saw it done in relation to someone, another group or another individual? I don't know if you had any particular instances. Tommy, is there any in particular that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think it's important to share a little bit about my background. I have over 25 years in corporate before I transitioned into academia. So I have lived in both worlds. And I've lived in my corporate life in a world where oftentimes I was, quote unquote, the only, right? And so management leadership would attempt, whether it was genuine or disingenuous, I don't know. But they were oftentimes met with either unconscious microaggressions, I'm not sure. So to give you an example, whenever I start a new project or work with a new group, the leader would say, oh, but I'm sure you'll like XYZ. And I know XYZ, whoever that person is, was definitely going to be a person of color. So they just automatically assume that because this person looked like me, I'm going to have this immediate connection and we're just going to be BFFs, right? And so I don't know if it's a conscious or a subconscious microaggression, but that is how I felt it in corporate.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. Even though that person and you might be night and day and completely different. And I think we've all had those experiences that there is no monolith here. There's no monolith. Black community or people of color community. Daisy, have you ever had those experiences where somebody has done something to include you, or they've consciously made that effort?
Yes, I have. But as Tommy was speaking, I remember one incident when I was just joining a company, and I was meeting the executive VP of Human Resources. And his last name was Johnston, Johnston. My maiden name is Johnson.
Okay.
So I was meeting this man, this white man, for the first time. And I shook his hand and I said, do you know we could be related? And the whole room burst out laughing. But it was my way of engaging him. There's no way we could be related. One, his name was Johnston. And I was Johnson. But it was just to break the ice and to let people know that, yes, I was the only in that space at that particular time. But I was just gonna be who I am. And I just said it, just like that. Do you know we could be related? And the whole room started laughing. But so that was me kind of reaching out. But I've been in different situations where people would second guess and, oh, I didn't even know you spoke English. And I said, well, you speak English so well. And I said, well, that's my first language.
Yeah.
But I chalk that up to ignorance, and not ignorance in a bad sense, but just the fact that people just don't know.
Right.
And I'm all for educating. So,
absolutely,
as you'll hear me say time and again, honest conversations build bridges. And, that's where we have to meet on that bridge.
I like that. I'm actually writing that down. Honest conversations build bridges. I agree with you, because unless we take off those masks and those armor and the shield, it's difficult for us to connect, regardless of background and where we're coming from. Gary, did you have any examples that from your own experience that you might want to share?
Sure. Yeah. So I come from a very diverse background where in university, I actually had various scholarships to play basketball at university. I went to University of Manitoba, and then I took my computer science degree. And so when I went to go work for my first company, there was a rapport between myself and the owner of the company because he loved basketball. And I told him that I had plans to go over and play professionally. And what he did is he welcomed me in. He loved basketball so much that he said,
Mhm.
go over to Europe and play. And then when you come back, you will still have your job, which was amazing.
Wow,
Yes. Yes.
that's incredible.
Mhm.
That is amazing. And so what I'm sort of getting from this is that, whether it's humor, like in Daisy's case, or, basketball, like just even connecting on something that is almost, universal, or that everyone can relate to, is often that one connecting factor that can make your relationship with someone progress. And I think that's amazing that you had that opportunity. I don't think that that happens very often, where people will just allow you to sort of be yourself and go and pursue your dreams, and you still, as you said, have a job. So I think that's amazing.
And I think
Yeah,
sometimes as well is, you have to break the ice, because sometimes that person is as nervous as you, or even
right.
more nervous. So if you're able to break that ice, then that helps as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, I
Absolutely.
Oh,
agree. I
piggyback.
agree with
Oh, okay.
Daisy. Sorry, go ahead, Tommy.
Oh, no, I was going to say I agree. I think what we often do, and when I say we, the marginalized populations, we often tend to be the one trying to make the dominant culture more comfortable, right?
Yes.
So we tend to go out of our ways to ensure that the dominant culture is comfortable and don't feel any, distress or certain things. One of my favorite books is Whistling Baldy, and the author talks about how he was walking through a park in New York, and he, minority male, and a white female is approaching, and how he can tell she tensed up. And in order to make her feel comfortable, he started whistling a classical song so she could know that he is not, someone who's going to hurt her. So connecting on that level. So I think it's important to understand that we just as much try to probably overcompensate for the dominant culture.
Yes, that's so true. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
I think
Wow.
it's got to be about relationship building,
Yeah.
so that's how we break down barriers, and that's
Mhm.
how we make people understand how we are, and that's how we understand other people as well, taking interest in other people and their cultures.
Absolutely. It's definitely a mutual, two-way street. And
Mhm.
I'm really reflecting on what Tommy said about the classical music whistling, because wow, like I can understand it from trying to make the dominant culture more comfortable, but I think it goes back to that same idea that you talked about before, about it being exhausting, because that's also very layered and
Yes.
complex. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't even um, really, and I think, it's about privilege, like based on whatever privilege you have, like I don't even think I would think of doing that, because it's exhausting. Like now I have to think about this person, but you've totally, pinpointed exactly what someone that is Black would have to experience when they're, in the park. And I think we've seen a lot of that, without going into, more recent examples of those types of incidents in parks, I think in the United States as well. But just going on to some of our other questions that we have here, I did really want to get into the heart of today's topic, which is those barriers in academia and the workplace. I kind of wanted to explore that. I know that it really varies there are similarities and there are differences, but I think when I think of the barriers in academia versus the workplace, I'm thinking of, like, for a faculty or professor, you're really very much focused on the tenure path or getting that job security, versus maybe in the corporate world, it's either more about advancing vertically and going up the ladder, or maybe some people don't want that and they just want to go horizontally, but in some way you're trying to advance in your career. And I wanted to know more about, from your experiences and your career paths, what do you think are some of the most significant barriers that either a Black academic faces in the academic environment, or with respect to the workplace, whether that's an executive or a manager or employee? And I know that it might vary, because I know Tommy is coming from an American context, whereas Gary and Daisy are operating in the Canadian environment. So it would be really interesting to kind of get a sense of that as well. I don't know if we want to start with Tommy first.
Sure. So regarding, let me talk about, well, I would say, let me just talk about where it meets for me, since I've lived in both worlds. In both worlds, I've always had to prove myself. So I had to prove that my education came from a top college university. Oftentimes, I have been challenged by students who are like, well, do you have a PhD? Where did you get the PhD from? What was your dissertation? Where can I find a copy of it? You know, I have been challenged in courses with by students, and then also by my peers, because they want to make sure that you earned your seat, right? And so that sometimes it was this need to do more. I think the biggest challenge in both environments that I experience, showing up as maybe one of two minorities, is that Black tax that I had to pay. So in addition to working hard to make sure I move up the ladder, either corporate or in academia, other employees or peers or students will seek me out as a place of refuge, a safe place to talk about their things. And so I would work, 10, 15 more hours more than my peers, just so I can make these accommodations for my colleagues.
Absolutely. No, I think that is, you hit the nail on the head in terms of that emotional labor and emotional tax, which is very invisible and which nobody will ever see. But it's there, and it's still, even though that's not necessarily part of the written job description, it still comes with the territory. Daisy, did you have any experiences you wanted to share about some of the barriers in either of these types of spheres?
Okay, so I grew up in Jamaica, where we were told that we could be anybody we wanted to be, and we did see people in those places. Yes, we had, we have our colorism issues as well, but we did see people who look like us in high places. So it was different though when so I never had an issue. I just figured if I wanted to be a manager, senior manager, head of an organization, I could be. But then when I moved to Canada, it was different. One, I didn't see anybody like me in high places in the organizations that I work. And I remember speaking to a general manager at one of the banks where I worked, and I was having a conversation with him around diversity and all of that. And he said to me, oh, but we are one of the most multicultural banks in Canada. And I said, that might be true, but most of the multiculturals are at the bottom. And that was what it was then. And so you are there, you you're doing great work. Your performance appraisal speak for itself, and yet there is this kind of a concrete barrier. I don't even call it glass ceiling. It's this concrete barrier that somehow it doesn't seem as if you can burst through it. Now things have changed, and I think we're going in the right direction. Last year with COVID and with George Floyd and all those things, people have now realized that, what people have been saying, and particularly Black people, what they've been saying all along, there's some truth to it. And I remember writing a couple of articles last year, and one actually said, if a Black person tells you they face racism or discrimination, believe them. Don't just jump to the conclusion that they're playing the race card.
Absolutely.
So like I said earlier, we're moving in the right direction. I hope things will continue. I hope it's not just performative statements that we are hearing from all these companies and organizations, but that real change will happen. I hope that organizations will realize that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a system. It's not a program.
Yep.
Where you go on a 3-hour course and you've had it, but it's something that has to be integrated into the full system where people feel that they belong, they feel they can contribute, they feel they're not only at the table, but their voices are being heard.
Absolutely. I think there were so many, nuggets of wisdom there in what you said, especially in the sense that it's a system. And I totally agree with you. It's not glass, it is concrete, because all of the various, whether it's, practices, policies, attitudes, opportunities, it all intersects to create this force field that Black people and people of color are trying to break through. Gary, I don't know if maybe there was any experiences or barriers that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I do remember when I was growing up, my parents always, especially my mom, emphasized that I needed to make sure to get an education. She knew that I wanted to play professional sports, but she said, make sure that you have an education, have something to fall back on. And once you get your degree or you get your education, nobody can take that away from you. But you also have to remember that you need to make sure that you do things 2 to 3 times better than everybody else so that you can stand out. So I come from, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked with governments, I've worked as well in academia where I've taught at university as well as with colleges. And I do remember an episode where I had gone to apply for a job. I had as an instructor at a college and I got the job. And so I'm sitting there with an orientation with the department head. And there was another gentleman with me who was a friend of mine. We both went through university together. We're both Black. And I remember the department head said, you guys were 2 of the best candidates. We're glad to have you on board. And it doesn't hurt that you guys are both Black as well. And which, shocked us because we're like, how could you say something like that in this day and age? So yes, we still have a long way to go.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think those types of comments, wherever they're coming from, consciously, subconsciously, I think that really encapsulates what you're saying, that we've tried to make progress and we've certainly made progress, but there is a long way for us to go. And I think one of the things I wanted to highlight from, I think what Tommy was saying about the emotional tax and the emotional labor that Black employees and Black academics have to experience is that racial trauma. There is an aspect of racial trauma that accumulates, and even when there's an accumulation of microaggressions. So just sort of summing that up, in terms of what those are, microaggressions are daily slights or insults, which little by little, they may not in and of themselves be something blatantly racist, but together they have this negative impact. And I think a lot of times when that accumulates and the reaction is one that's not palatable to everyone else, it's, people are very quick to stereotype that as, the angry Black person. And, we know that, you're all like this because look at this reaction that you're having right now. And I kind of wanted to delve a little bit more into that and get more of an insight from you all as to whether you have any practical tips for Black employees and Black academics in terms of healing from the impact of that racial trauma, and if there's any tangible self-care guidance that you might have on this. And I might ask Tommy first if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is to compassion fatigue is also a factor in there as well, right? So we have racial trauma and that thing, but we also have compassion fatigue that we have to address. So the first thing is we got to set up some healthy boundaries, right? And so making sure that we don't stay in that mindset where we always feel like we're having to prove ourselves and feeling like, okay, in order to keep the seat at the table, I got to still, in my case, publish 3 or 4 extra articles just to, keep the seat at the table. And so releasing those spoken and unspoken expectations that are not the same for everyone else. And that's hard. That's a really, really hard one to do. I recognize that. But also establishing and honoring healthy boundaries, whatever that will look like for yourself in that environment. It's one thing to say we're going to have them and set them, but it's another thing to honor them. And to honor a boundary that you establish takes a lot of courage. I do recognize that. It takes a lot of courage and commitment to yourself. But with time and with practice, I love a quote by Maya Angelou that says, we teach people how to treat us, right? And so by setting those boundaries and honoring those boundaries consistently, we can teach others how to treat us.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the boundaries idea is extremely important because you're also looking to be sustainable, whether that's in the academic sphere or in the corporate sphere. It's like that. I know it's a cliche, but I really don't think it's a cliche anymore to say it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, because it really is. Like, if we're pushing, if people are pushing themselves so hard just for the very beginning, in order, just like you said, to keep that seat at the table or to prove their value, I can bring value to this organization, then what happens later on when you're burnt out and you have nothing left to give? And so I think what you're saying is so crucial and so important, but we don't necessarily learn those things at school or even in the workplace. It's more, as you're saying, we often learn them from people such as yourselves, like therapists or counselors, who are helping us to understand, okay, you do need boundaries, otherwise, and maybe there is some trauma that you're kind of repeating or acting out of because there's a lack of boundaries there. So I find that very, very powerful. Gary, did you have any insights that you wanted to share on this particular point?
Sure. I remember growing up, and you can't tell but right now because people used to touch my hair, okay, a lot. They touch my afro because they go, oh my gosh, it's so cool. It's like wool or it's like cotton or whatever. And I would look at them and go, did you ask me to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, well, then it's like me touching your hair, and that's not right. So, I had to educate them, put up boundaries like Tommy was saying. And it's important for that because you need to have a conversation so that people understand that it's not okay to do this just because you think that, that I'm different than you, to be able to touch my hair or to treat me in a different way. So like I said, it's a conversation that continually needs to happen. Were there times where I had fights? Yes, there were, but that's not the way to do it. You have to have conversations with people all the time and enlighten them on how things should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think that's a very unfortunately common example that you're saying, that people really have no sense of boundaries, and it's like, I can touch you, and that's the same as, that is literally the same as an assault. That's what it is, you're nobody should be touching nobody without their consent. Daisy, did you have anything that you wanted to add on this topic?
Yes, in addition to all of the above that Tommy and Gary just said, I have been working for myself for a number of years, and boundaries for me are very important. As an entrepreneur, we tend to think we can work 24/7. And I realized that, so I set my hours and I stick to them. It's 9 to 4. If I want to work beyond that, then it's up to me. But my clients have to know that those are my hours. And there are people who would phone me and ask me, well, can you do some coaching with me on Sunday, or on Saturday? They may phone me on Friday, can you coach me tomorrow? And I said, no, it's because my work week is Monday to Friday, because I do have family. Yes, I have adult kids, but weekends are, weekends are family time. So boundaries are important. And another thing that's important for me is to have a support group, have a group that you can, I call them your personal board of directors. It's people who you can bounce ideas off. If you get frustrated, you need help in solving an issue, there's somebody or there's a group of people that you connect with. You can bare your heart to them to say, this is what I'm experiencing, or this is what has happened to me. Tell me that it's true or not true. Tell me that I'm not overreacting, that kind of thing. So we have to put in place these boundaries, or so we know that we're safe and we're protecting ourselves because we have to. The burden that we carry, as Black people it's so much. And sometimes I say to myself that you know what, we are a tolerant lot because we see so much, we face so much, and yet we get up and we go at it every day.
That is, yeah, I'm really just soaking in, especially the board of directors, personal board of directors that you said. I think that's crucial because without that, it's very easy to feel isolated and like you're alone and you might be the only person going through that. And then, coupled with all of the other intersections of your identity, whether that's race or any other intersecting aspects. And so I think the things that I'm hearing in terms of from all of you, setting boundaries, being able to say no to people, having a safe space where you can talk to people candidly and not feel like it's going to jeopardize you in some way. Because I think it's really true, whether you're in academia or in the workplace, that is a very real concern that someone would have is if I were to open up, would that have an impact on my job or my job security or my ability to attract, as you're saying, clients if you're an entrepreneur. So I'm really sort of soaking in the importance of that personal board of directors and the boundaries. I think that those are excellent self-care tips. One of the things I wanted to get to, I know there's a number of questions which we'll definitely get to. I think something that does warrant, attention is, I think when we were speaking before, I think it was Daisy that mentioned that there is a responsibility of senior management and leaders and decision makers, the ones who are making the policies and running these systems, to actively set the tone for inclusion and to make sure that it, cascades into the rest of the organization. My question for all of you is, what do you think are some of the qualities and behaviors that it's essential for senior managers and decision makers in order to have so that we can embed this inclusion within both the academic and workplace cultures? Gary, did you, maybe we can start with you?
Sure. I think that the senior leaders, the managers, what they have to see is that everybody is different. Everybody's unique and everybody should have a voice at the table. Don't exclude everybody. You need to make sure that everybody, can say their opinions openly and honestly. And when I work with organizations as well, I also say that you need to have a plan. And because you're going to be making changes, these changes probably won't come overnight, but because it involves everybody who are stakeholders in the organization, you need to make sure that you have some type of change management plan and you include everybody in there and ask people either with focus groups, with surveys, one-to-one interviews, things like that, what they believe that can help make the organization better. So without that, if you're not going to include everybody, then people will feel slighted and left out. And that's extremely important if you want these changes to stick, in my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense because, in any, as you're the expert in this area, and in any change transformation program that you are trying to implement in an organization, you have the supporters, you have the people that really don't care either way, and then you have resistors. So I think your strategy is really one that makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to move forward, but with everybody on board, no matter where they might have fell on that spectrum. Daisy, did you have any thoughts on the responsibility that senior managers and leaders have in this regard?
Well, just as Gary says, it comes from the top, and senior management need to lead by example. So it doesn't make sense you come up with all these policies and procedures and then abandon them. You have to live it so people can see you operating in that space and know that you're serious. And then when it comes down to say in terms of hiring and the HR department, they have a lot of work to do there as well. And I won't really go into that much details, but something as simple as drafting a job description, for example. Make sure that it has neutral language so it does
Right.
not exclude certain people, whether it's women or whether it's, people from underrepresented groups. Yeah, so, phrases like nice to have, those kind of things. Do you really need that in a job description? And like I said, just make sure that you have the policies, but they're alive, you're living it. They're not
Right.
someplace they're gathering dust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And Tommy, did you have any particular thoughts on senior management and leaders and their responsibility?
Yeah, I think just number one characteristic is just self-awareness, recognizing that as leadership, you cast a shadow, right? And so very similar to what Daisy said, walk it like you talk it. If you say that is what you're going to do, then do it. Recognize privilege and call out privilege. So again, I say number one, self-awareness.
Excellent. No, I would totally agree with that. Yeah, so that's, yeah, I'm definitely soaking that in. Those are all extremely, extremely good points. And I think it's true. I think people, if they don't see you walking it, then everything just starts to unravel then. And, any support that you may have garnered really starts to disappear. And I think it's dangerous for any kind of transformation program because yeah, you want to be able to have people trust what you're doing and know that you have the integrity to exactly what you said, do what you say you're going to do. So just before we get to the questions, I definitely want to get to them. There was one particular aspect that I think we were talking about before, and that is the importance of having safe spaces for Black academics and Black executives and managers and employees to be themselves and express themselves. And I know one of the aspects of that that we were talking about earlier was more around affinity groups or employer resource groups. So just in case anyone in our audience isn't aware of what these are, they're quite common in a lot of organizations. I would almost call them like communities of inclusion, where many people are gathering together, whether that's students or faculty or staff or employees in the corporate world, and they're getting together on the basis of shared diversity characteristics. So you could have, for example, a Black employees group or a women's group, and really, most of the time, the main reason they're formed is more for networking and developing themselves professionally. And there's a number of different ways that organizations can kind of help them, whether that's financial or through other resources. But I wanted to get a better sense of the types of safe spaces that you think might be important for Black employees to have. And I know in particular, Gary was actually talking about this one example of being involved in even a community-based Black business owners network in BC. So maybe if I can start with you, and then we can talk about the workplace as well. I just found this one to be very interesting, and I think that kind of network is gaining traction in a lot of different areas.
Sure. Okay. So yes, I'm a member of the Black Business Association of BC. So it was founded by 4 different individuals in British Columbia. And basically, what it allows Black business owners to do is to network. We can join mentorship programs. There's leadership, and it allows us to band together to have a voice. So last month, the panel actually met with one of the ministers of Canada to talk about our different concerns and how we can actually get more help, look at funding, look at various things for everybody as a group instead of trying to do it individually, because as a group, I believe that you're stronger. So I'm a member of that, also of Afrobiz, which is a Black entrepreneur directory that's online. And I'm also looking at joining the Black North Initiative, which looks at all aspects of Canadian life to utilize business first as a mindset for Black business owners.
That's excellent. That's really, that's amazing. And I'm sure that is an important group for Black entrepreneurs who, because you don't necessarily have those same historical networks or those, whether they're formal or informal networks. And so that's, I can see that that's an extremely, powerful group and coalition. Tommy, did you have any examples that you wanted to share about those types of networks or safe spaces?
Yeah, I just have 2 tips. I think it's important that you don't operate or live in a silo. So I think affinity groups and these, whether it's internal, external, is so important so that you're not operating in a silo. We tend to rationalize or give excuses. But if we have a place to bounce off and run it by someone who's external, it kind of helps us say, oh, that wasn't so nice. We may need to raise this issue up. So definitely don't work in a silo, join an affinity group, whether it's internal or external. And I think my last point, which left me, did I make a note about it? If you do it internally, don't penalize. So the affinity groups don't say, oh, you only can meet during lunchtime. Well, that's not fair. I would be able to enjoy my lunch and also enjoy the affinity group. I should not have to choose, right? And so just being conscious again of making sure that all are included and in a way that they're not penalized if they choose to participate.
Excellent.
Right. And
Daisy?
Yes. So here in Canada, we tend to refer to affinity groups as ERGs, employee resource groups, and they're great. And a lot of organizations are really buying into that. And I encourage people to like Tommy said, don't operate in isolation. Share your ideas. You're struggling with stuff. There's a group for you to speak to. But to piggyback on what Gary says, here in the Greater Toronto area, we have and from an entrepreneurial perspective, we have lots of groups that focus on Black entrepreneurs. The Black Business and Professional Association. There is the Afro-Canadian Business Network with my friend Ryan O'Neill, and there are so many others, the Jamaica Canadian Association. And within those groups, they have mentoring, they have scholarship awards for our like young people. There's the United Achievers Club here in Brampton that focuses on scholarship awards for children, young people who are going into university and so on. So yes, there are all these different groups where you can find support if you're an entrepreneur, and with Wes Hall and the Black North Initiative, that's brand new, and that's really digging into the corporate space. So that it just started earlier this year, I think, or late last year, but it's a group that's really taking it to corporations, and a lot of changes are going to happen from that particular initiative.
That's fantastic. I think, the common theme of that, sort of going off of what Gary was saying, is that you really do have that strength in numbers when you're able to, come together because of shared issues and even just sharing ideas and best practices. So I want to be mindful of the time. I know we have a number of questions, so I'm going to try and look at the questions and pose one of them. I know somebody said, so someone has a question for Daisy. So because I love the idea of showing up authentically as myself as an Indigenous woman. However, I'm wondering how this impacts opportunities or even causes harm and discrimination, particularly in academia. I don't know if...
Well, I can't really speak to academia. Probably Tommy could at some point. But showing up authentically, it just means being yourself, because you don't want to change. You can't change who you are, and if you try changing who you are, then you end up being nobody to nobody. Actually, you have to be. This is who I am. You have to feel confident in who you are. Speak to that confidence, have faith in your abilities, that you're able to do that. And I think at the end of the day, it's just believe in yourself and, have conversations around yes, people might not feel comfortable, in accepting you, but you have to accept you first.
Right.
And
I
once you do
like
that,
that.
then, things happen.
Yes,
That's
I have
awesome.
one quick comment,
Yeah.
and I love what Daisy says, and in regards to what she says, that if you're trying to please everybody, then in the end you're not pleasing yourself, and that causes greater damage.
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%.
absolutely.
100%. I don't know if Tommy, if you had anything to add on that.
Yes, I love the idea of showing up authentically, and I encourage it. You need to know the landscape, right? First, don't walk into the game and don't know the players
Mhm.
and the rules of the game. So again, it takes courage to show up authentically. So you have to be courageous to know your landscape, and to me that equates to just knowing the culture of the organization that you're walking into, right? And just recognizing that. You may have to educate others on who you are. So just have that patience. Don't have assumptions that they should just know.
Those are really, really good
Yeah.
tips. Actually, I definitely, could learn from those. I really liked what you said about knowing the landscape and knowing the players, because you're so right. I think oftentimes we might go into something head on and kind of have blinders, and I don't know about the climate. I thought that was an excellent point. I just want to get to some of these other questions here. So there is someone who's asking, as an adult with a speech impediment, during the interview process, do you suggest explaining it before the interview? Otherwise, I feel the need to cover, and then people think I'm nervous. Do you assimilate speech with capability? That's my fear. I don't know if anyone had any particular thoughts on that and how to sort of navigate that during the interview process.
My initial reaction to that is, if it's going to increase your anxiety, again, we want to make sure you show up authentically, then have that conversation prior to.
Mhm.
That way you walk in, everyone knows, you feel comfortable. It's not like the big elephant in the room. Sometimes I feel like when we're in interviews, we're already nervous, and then add on top of that covering, and then your anxiety is going up. That's a lot. That's a
Right.
lot. So if you know that this would decrease your anxiety by having a conversation prior to, by all means do it.
Mhm. I totally agree with Tommy on that. If it's deal with it right, if it's going to affect you to that degree, then speak up, about it from the start. To say, you might notice I might be a bit slow in answering questions. It's not that I don't know the answer. It's just because of, the speech impediment or something to that effect. So I would do that right up front, because it doesn't make sense. You go in, you pretend to be, all there, and
Yes.
then you end up leaving the interview and not hearing back from them, when you could have, prefaced the interview with, just being clear and open.
Mhm.
This is who I am. Yeah.
I agree
Absolutely.
totally, because you're starting to try to create a relationship and a rapport from the get-go.
Mhm.
So if they don't know this and you don't feel comfortable, during the interview to be able to say these things or to uncover, okay, what's going on with you, because you're more than capable. You're there. If they brought you in, they believe that you're an ideal candidate to come
Mhm.
in. They want to find out more about you, and this is a part of you. So don't hide it.
I love that. And I
Yeah.
love that you're being so honest that you're almost disarming any type of bias or unconscious or conscious bias that someone might have. Whether, I think that can even be seen in relation to having accents, or like this individual is talking about the speech impediment, we sort of jump to, well, just like this person saying, are they capable of this, or are they capable of that? And I think this is what you all have said is an excellent way of disarming that. We have a lot of positive comments too. Just everyone's saying, thank you, panelists, for answering so beautifully. People wanting to sincerely thank you all for sharing your struggles and how you overcame adversity. I hope you know how valuable this is to all students, as well as many of us working in the corporate world. Thank you again. There's a lot of questions. I'm just trying to be mindful of the time here. I guess one question that is an interesting one that it would be great to get your take on is how can people balance being a strong ally and not contribute to emotional labor? That's an interesting one.
Mhm.
I like that one. I'll take a stab at it first.
Sure.
It goes back to how we show up in all of our relationships. We ask the person, how can I best support you? Don't assume, don't go in with assumptions, don't go in with your expectations or what you think that person needs. Simply ask, how can I best support you? And then try to identify what's that one, a skill set that is your thing, like that's your jam, and say, hey, you know what? You say you need XYZ, and that is actually my sweet spot. So that's how I can best show up for you.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other, to add to Tommy's point, is to listen. Sometimes people just don't go in giving advice. Sometimes they just want a listening ear to say, hear me out. This is what I'm going through. And of course, it's also to educate yourself, find out what if you hear of a particular situation, try and find out more about it so that you can carry on a conversation around the topic. But what I'm in addition to what Tommy said, I just said, just listen, ask, yes, how can I help you? How can I support you? I remember actually in last April, just before the George Floyd thing, I was actually doing a webinar, and my space was invaded by racist diatribe and pornographic images and all of that.
Wow.
And I was just flabbergasted. There was my audience just coming on.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And finally I was able to, take myself off screen, at least close down the thing. But then there were people, who actually contacted me afterwards to say, how are you feeling? And then it made me, feel good. But it did not prevent me from carrying on with my webinar. I ended that one, but the next week I was back because I'm saying, listen, I'm not going to allow any racist anybody to stop me from doing what I need to do.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that is an amazing example, and unfortunately, that seems to be happening. With us having to rely a lot more on Zoom. I think there's like a term for it called like Zoom bombing or something like that.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article on it that I was Zoom bombed.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're all going to have to take a look at that article, because I know that's something that we're also grappling with is, how do you address these types of things? I know some organizations will have, they'll just shut it down. Like, we're going to shut this down now, and then we will reconvene. So I think that's an excellent article for all of us to definitely read. I do apologize to all of the participants that are asking questions. They're all amazing questions. And I just want to say one comment that someone just wrote about what you all said. Thank you so much for this. Very eye-opening and makes me aware of my role as an ally. So yeah, I want to be mindful of the time, and I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Tommy Odom Lawson, Daisy Wright, and Gary Priam for their time. It's been an amazing conversation, and I think all of us, have very much benefited from this, and just from listening to and learning from your experiences. I know that what you've said today is extremely valuable for us, whether we're students, whether we're in academia, faculty, staff, in the corporate world, working as well. So thank you so much again, and we look forward to connecting with you further. And thank you to all the participants for joining us, and to the communications team today for helping us facilitate this event. And yeah, we really look forward to continuing this conversation with you all.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. Take care. Okay. Bye now.
Bye.